The Bush family. For a century, a name that feels less like a name and more like an institution. Presidents, governors, CIA directors, etched into the very granite of the American establishment. But what if the origin of their nearly $500 million fortune wasn't Texas oil or Wall Street genius? What if it all traces back to a single toxic transaction in 1942? An act so damning, the United States government seized every penny under the Trading with the Enemy Act. I'm Beatrice, and my passion is uncovering the stories hidden just beneath the gilded surface of history. This is the story of how that forbidden money wasn't destroyed, it was returned, becoming the seed capital for the most powerful political dynasty of our time. But before we unpack that one defining transaction, you need to understand the sheer scale of the empire it built. We're not just talking about influence, we're talking about a fortune so vast the number will shock you. Between $400 and $500 million. That's the conservative estimate of the Bush family's collective fortune. It's an empire that sustains itself. George W. Bush, for instance, saw his personal wealth doubled to over $40 million after leaving the White House. His brother, Jeb, commands a similar fortune. But the true symbol of their power isn't just money, it's stone and sea. The Walker's Point Estate in Kennenbunkport, Maine, a sprawling family compound jutting out into the Atlantic. For over a century, it has stood as a rock-bound fortress, a private kingdom shielded from the world. It feels untouchable, almost mythic. But every myth has an origin story, and this one begins not with a triumph, but with a secret splashed across a newspaper. With a headline like Hitler's Angel, the exposure was total. For the family patriarch, Prescott Bush, this should have been the end. Career over. Reputation destroyed. Some whispered it could even mean a trial for treason. And the US government did act. Federal agents were dispatched. But what they did next, that's the part of the story that seems to have been deliberately erased from history. To understand what happened in that moment of crisis, we first have to understand the man at its center, the true architect of the dynasty, Prescott Sheldon Bush. He wasn't just a businessman, he was the very picture of the American establishment. Forged in the Gothic halls of Yale, a member of the infamous and secretive Skull and Bone Society. Towering at 6'4", with a gaze that commanded respect, and a presence that, as one contemporary noted, made him look more like a senator than any senator I've ever met. He married into money to Dorothy Walker and ascended through the ranks of the ultimate white shoe investment firm, Brown Brothers Harriman, becoming a managing partner. From his perch in the canyons of Lower Manhattan, amidst the constant hum of ticker tapes, Prescott Bush managed the fortunes of America's elite. But it's one of his side hustles, a directorship that is often just a footnote, that holds the key. He was one of 7 directors of a small bank called the Union Banking Corporation, or UBC. On the surface, it was just another name in the phone book. In reality, UBC was the main American banking channel for one of the most powerful industrialists in Germany, Fritz Thyssen. And who was Fritz Thyssen? He was the German steel magnate who, by his own proud and chilling admission in his book, I Paid Hitler, was one of the earliest and most crucial financiers of the Nazi Party. Let's pause. A Wall Street director doing business with a German industrialist. You might think this is just standard, morally grey capitalism. You would be dangerously wrong. This wasn't just about money. The paper trail from Prescott Bush's bank and from his other business interests, like the Silesian American Corporation, doesn't just lead to Germany's war machine. It leads directly to the Auschwitz concentration camp, which used slave labor from mines and steel plants his companies helped operate. The documents are undeniable. Through his directorships, Prescott Bush was profiting from business that relied on the horrors of the Nazi regime. For years, these deals were buried in the fine print of bank ledgers, secrets held by a handful of men in smoke-filled rooms. But with America hurtling toward war, a single journalist was about to detonate a headline that would send shockwaves from Wall Street to the White House. The explosion came in July 1942 in the cold, hard ink of the New York Herald Tribune. The headline was devastating. Hitler's angel has $3 million in U.S. bank. Suddenly, the smoke-filled rooms were blown wide open. The secrets were out. For Prescott Bush and his partners, it was a catastrophe.
Their quiet explanations of a simple, unpaid courtesy fell on deaf ears. With a headline like that, exposure was total. This should have been the end for Prescott Bush. His career over, his reputation destroyed. You could even imagine whispers of a trial for treason. And the US government did act. Federal agents were dispatched. But what they did next, that's the part of the story that seems to have been deliberately erased from our history. On October 20th, 1942, the US government gave its answer. Under the full authority of the Trading with the Enemy Act, federal agents moved in. They seized all the assets of the Union Banking Corporation. The seizure order was not vague.
It explicitly named one of the bank's directors whose shares were being confiscated on behalf of enemy nationals, Prescott Sheldon Bush. The government's own reports were damning. They laid out how UBC was a key part of a transatlantic money pipeline, one that helped finance the German steel and coal industries, the very industries forging the Nazi war machine. This was it. The smoking gun, caught red-handed, collaborating with the enemy in a time of war. The story should have ended right there, in disgrace, with a trial, with the end of a family's ambition. But it doesn't. While American soldiers were dying on the battlefields of Europe to defeat the Nazis, what was the price for banking with them? It wasn't prison. It was a payout. Because after the war, in a move that seems to defy all logic and morality, the government quietly unseized the assets. The shares were liquidated, and in 1951, Prescott Bush and his fellow shareholders received a check. His cut was $1.5 million. Let that sink in for a moment. $1.5 million. In today's money, that's an enormous fortune. It wasn't a fine, it wasn't a punishment, it was a reward. The seed capital for a dynasty, paid for by the very system he had betrayed. So there it is, $1.5 million, the reward for banking with the enemy. But this tainted money, this original sin capital, created a new, more dangerous problem. It was poisonous. To use it, the family couldn't just launder the cash, they had to launder their entire identity. And that required a brilliant, cynical strategy that began by sending a young George H.W. Bush to a dusty corner of West Texas. And West Texas, in 1948, was the perfect place to start a fire to burn the old identity to the ground. This was a world away from the dark suits and whispered deals of Brown Brothers Harriman. This was a land of myth, built on rugged individualism and the promise of black gold. By sending his son there, Prescott wasn't just setting him up in business with the $1.5 million. He was deploying him as the lead architect of a new family story. The tainted legacy of a Wall Street banker for the Third Reich would be scrubbed clean, replaced by the sun-bleached, all-American image of the Texas oilman. And while the son was building the future, the father was busy rewriting the past. Back on the East Coast, Prescott Bush executed a breathtaking pivot. he entered politics. He was handsome, charismatic, and impeccably connected. As one contemporary noted, Prescott looked more like a senator than any senator I've ever met. By 1952, that's exactly what he was, a Republican senator from Connecticut. And in the ultimate act of cynical irony, he was appointed to the Senate Banking and Currency Committee. The very body that policed the same financial system he had once so expertly manipulated. But let's pause here for a moment. The man who banked for Hitler's financier becomes a respected US senator. It sounds like the perfect crime, perfectly executed. You might think this is where the story ends, but Prescott's personal redemption was never the final objective. It was just the foundation. The real prize was bigger. It was the presidency. And to get there, the family needed more than a clean reputation. They needed an entirely new mythology, forged in the heart of America and funded by capital that no one dared trace back to its source: the New England patriot and the Texas wildcatter. The two narratives were masterfully woven together, erasing the inconvenient truths that lay in between. Prescott had done it. He hadn't just laundered the money, he had laundered the name. In 1972, Prescott Bush died a respected statesman, his secret seemingly buried with him. He passed down wealth and a famous name, but he also passed down a different inheritance, a playbook for operating in the shadows, a blueprint for turning power into silence. And as his son, George H.W. Bush, rose through the ranks of the CIA and Washington's deepest corridors of power, he would use that playbook in ways that made his father's sins look like child's play. The game was no longer about money. It was about shaping history and erasing anything that stood in the way. George H.W. Bush's rise was shrouded in shadows. When JFK was assassinated in 1963, a strange memo from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover himself mentions a national security briefing given to one Mr. George Bush of the Central Intelligence Agency, a connection the future president would deny for decades. He moved through the darkness of the intelligence world, eventually becoming its director, mastering the art of secrets and silence, and he used that power to its fullest. As president, on Christmas Eve of 1992, he issued pardons to 6 key figures in the Iran-Contra scandal, a massive arms for hostages conspiracy run from his own White House. The independent counsel, Lawrence Walsh, was furious, stating that the president's pardons meant the Iran-Contra cover-up, which has continued for more than 6 years, has now been completed. The playbook was clear. When the truth becomes inconvenient, simply erase it. But the dynasty's ultimate coronation came in 2000. After a chaotic election of hanging chads and contested ballots, the presidency was decided not by the voters, but by a 5-4 Supreme Court decision. George W. Bush, Prescott's grandson, was handed the White House. The transformation was complete. The £1.5 million, the seed capital born from a Nazi financier's American bank, had been laundered through generations of oil fields, politics, and power plays. It had finally, definitively, bought the highest office in the world. If you believe these hidden histories need to be brought into the light, subscribe and join our community of curious minds. And I truly want to know your thoughts. Were you familiar with this part of the Bush family's story? And how does it change your perspective?